All right, our text for this week is the first 11 verses of Ecclesiastes. And first 11 verses, if you didn't get a textual worksheet, it's just a booklet that looks like this. You can grab one. Clay's in the back if you want to raise your hand. We're going to use this today is the plan. So if you need one, just raise your hand and Clay will come find you. It just so happened that the text broke itself into 12 sections. Lucky me. So we have 12 classes. Skipping the class that Brent and Andy are going to teach for us. But so we did an introduction last week, and then this week we're going to get right into the first 11 verses. If you'd have the privilege of sitting in someone's living room and getting to read through the Bible and talk about it together as I have, then you know, and I hope, at least it's the goal, that our classes on Sunday mornings covering Ecclesiastes would be just like that. I know it's hard to picture, we're all still waking up. So, but let's be awake and alert this morning. I wanted to do just a real quick reminder about our study to help us keep our minds where it needs to be. I think it's important that we don't simply study the book of Ecclesiastes or any book of the Bible simply for ourselves. And what I mean is just to gain knowledge. There's a text in Ephesians, the 4th chapter. We won't spend the time to go there, but in verses 11 through 16, which is one of the defining places in the New Testament that gives us the authority to even have Bible classes. Of course, in addition to Acts 2, when the believers met every day and from house to house. And I write this in every single Bible that I have, and I thought it'd just be helpful to go through these three things again. But from the text in Ephesians, it lays out the purpose of a church, and it also lays out our purposes in our Bible studies, which is really helpful to me. The first one being, am I grounded and growing in my faith? Which comes from the statement that we're no longer tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. Can anybody tell me why that would be important for all of us to be no longer tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine? Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Yes, sir.
Well, there's a lot of false doctrine out there, and if I'm not well grounded, whatever the flavor of the day is, I'm likely to go after. But if I'm firmly grounded in God's Word, it assists me in kind of evaluating all of this, whatever the flavor of the day is, to say, okay, here's what I read in the Scriptures, is what this guy is saying. Is it consistent with what I see in God's Word?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Mackey. Can someone, the second line, can I verbalize what I believe? Paul says, God says through Paul, speaking the truth in love. Okay, it's one thing to be able to believe the truth. I've got it here in my head, right? Jesus is the Son of God. He died for my sins. But can I verbalize it? Can anybody else help us or explain just briefly why would that be important for us to do? Yes.
Well, so to practice, sometimes you think you know something until you try to say it out loud, and it's surprisingly different and difficult to actually say it out loud, and then also then say it in love, and we can practice it with each other, where we can make mistakes, or through others, how they would say it.
Absolutely. Excellent. There is no other place I'd rather be practicing saying what I believe than in front of you all. I'm far more nervous in front of maybe my coworkers or from unbelievers, and I need to first get practice at speaking in love in front of you all, and then I'll be better equipped to go out. And then lastly, am I causing the growth of Christ's body? Am I doing my part, using my gifts to encourage and build one another up? And this is a quote, "From him, Christ, the whole body, joined and knit together, builds itself up in love." Why does the body need to build itself up? Someone else.
So it can be efficient.
Good. Ryan?
I can say it for unity.
Great. Also, yes, Dave?
I was going to say, if you think of a building that's building itself up, well, what's a building for but to harbor others into
Excellent.
it so it draws others to it?
Excellent. Very good. And if not the body, who else is going to build up the body? There's no one else that's going to do it. Christ purposefully made it so that we build each other up. It's a beautiful design. It's his design. So those are real important keys. Just a couple brief reminders. I like to remind myself of these sometimes, before I walk through the doors or whatever. But before I speak, my thoughts need to be conveyed from ideas that I'm getting from the text. In other words, I need to check what I'm saying. Is it out of the text, or is it just from my own personal life, or what I've heard other people say, or what I've grown up believing? I need to be careful about that and make sure that it stems from the text, because that's going to impact our studies. And then how are my words going to be received by others? Again, speaking the truth in love. Am I using insider language rather than something that an outsider would be able to understand? This is really important, especially in our Sunday morning classes. We are blessed with more outsiders than probably any other class, I would say. So just remember, we all tend to, I do it too, we kind of speak, as it's been termed, Christianese, and we say phrases or things, or maybe draw conclusions from verses quickly without possibly first asking, how would an outsider hear what I'm saying? And it's really good practice because, again, my favorite, lastly, practice, practice, practice. Again, this is the best place for us to practice. Was there a hand? Okay. All right. So, enough of that. We're going to go ahead and get into the text. Finally, best part. You're like, well, we took 1 1/4 classes to do that. We're finally there. We did do an overview last class, but now we're going to narrow down here and start in these first 11 verses. A couple helpful keys here for this. You want to begin, and I think these are written kind of on the inside of the first page, but you want to begin, and by the way, I should stop and back up. We're going to take about 7 minutes. I'm not going to talk. There's colored pencils back there, so if anybody doesn't need any, here in a couple minutes, I'll just have Clay pass those out, if you don't mind, Clay. And then I won't talk. You guys will get to look at the text, discover God's precious truths for yourself, underline, mark, do whatever you want. When we're done, then we're going to talk about the text. And at least from past experience, it's very, very good and rewarding textual study. So, begin with a fast reading, read through a few quickly times. What questions or observations are you going to see in the text? Those are really important. What did you see that was interesting or jumps out at you from the text? And do you see any themes, threads, or patterns? And then there's a little space at the top of this section, the first 11 verses, there'll be another space. You can write your own title. You don't have to go with the title that is already there for you. And lastly, the best part, we're going to practice explaining the text. How would I explain this if I was talking to a friend? Ecclesiastes is a outstanding book, one of the first books, depending on the person and the situation, to read the Bible with a friend. Excellent, excellent text. And so one of the main goals for the class, at least that I had, other than the fact that I need the message myself, is for us to be able to feel equipped enough that we could sit down and read this with a friend. So, if anybody needs any colored pencils or one of these booklets, would you raise your hand? And Clay will get those passed out. I got a couple up here, a couple over there. You may just want to grab 2 colors. I'm going to go ahead and start. We're at about 9:13-ish, 14. So at about 9:20, we'll stop the time, and then we'll go through the text. Yes. Absolutely. Thank you. I didn't see. There's just one hand back there, but I don't think so. Thanks. Any more of these? I don't think so. Sorry. We may have ran out of booklets, and I apologize. I can certainly print more. If you need any after class, please let me know. I'm going to be doing this with you too, by the way, lest you think this is just you. Just about 3 more minutes, and then we'll stop. About 1 more minute, I think. Okay, I think we'll stop there. Would somebody mind reading the text for us, verses 1 through 11? Out loud, please.
Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Oh, excuse me. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil which he toils under the sun? The generation goes and the generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea. The sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been, or it has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after.
Thank you, Dave. All right. So your friend is asking you for help to explain his or her questions from this text. Oh, I forgot about this. Not important. What is it? Let's start with this question. What is the audience? Remember, who is it that we talked about last week who's delivering this message? What's he call himself? Translated, or the meaning, the idea is preacher, or one who calls an assembly of people. So they're reading this text and their question is, What is it that the audience is possibly believing that the preacher is so strongly trying to warn against and show that life under the sun does not provide? So we're kind of playing Jeopardy with the text. What is the audience believing that the preacher is warning so strongly against?
Well, man or the world thinks that, if you achieve all this great wealth or this great success, or basically you can fill in the blank with whatever is valuable to that person, making the assessment that that's going to give them fulfillment and satisfaction. And Solomon is saying, no, it doesn't. No matter, even if you have all the wisdom in the world, if it's not grounded in the Lord, and the Lord isn't the core of your existence and your being, you're not going to be fulfilled. You're not going to be satisfied, because I've seen it all, I've done it all, and I'm still, it doesn't bring the satisfaction and fulfillment, and if the Lord is not present.
Okay. Could somebody help me see where in the text that the real, quote-unquote, subject or issue is identified? I think it's identified twice.
I think maybe one is in verse 3, the idea of working for nothing. But then also at the very end, verse 11, this fear of never being remembered, or the things that you do never amounting to anything. I don't know if those are the two that you're looking for.
Very good. Actually, one that I had kind of overlooked. But the first one, absolutely. Look closely at verse 3. What does a man gain for all his efforts? Can somebody expound a little bit on this idea of man's efforts? We kind of talked a little bit at the introduction. All a man's efforts that he labors at under the sun. What is the preacher meaning with that phrase, under the sun? Or what's he not meaning?
Things of the air.
Things of the what?
Like where there's air.
Okay. Literally, physically under the sun? Is that what you're saying?
Not in heaven, not heavenly.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Basically, life as it's lived with no view of eternity. Eternity is not in mind. Life lived that way, under the sun. It's kind of a beautiful way of saying that. Does anybody have any? Yes, sir.
Well, you turn over to Matthew 6:19, Jesus basically answers this question. It says, "Do not lay up yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up yourselves treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also."
That's a great conclusion, and you're absolutely right. The preacher has not brought heaven into the picture yet, but you're absolutely right. Were you going to say something, Jay?
No, just relating to what you're talking about with the earth, like he's defined what that is. Like there's a cyclical pattern, everything is going to be just so. Like the sun will rise and set. Like there's going to be constant behavior there. Like this has all been set into motion. The natural world is existing. The winds are blowing north and south. That's just always going to happen that way. What was it, the water, like the seas. They're going to do what they do, yet they're not going to overflow. So there's like all this natural, I'm not sure what the word is. Nature has been set into motion and it is going to exist the way it should every time. So it's like, it seems like he's pointing that out and then contrast that later with the man.
Very good. 1 second, there's one in the back. You brought up an excellent point, kind of springing off that. The preacher is primarily discussing man, and he is now using nature as an illustration of man's life. So you might get accidentally caught up in nature. He's using that as an illustration of man's life. Yes, in the back.
And you know, what Jay said, you know, the earth has been designed and has its cycles. Regardless of our toil, we're not changing that. And so that's how I read that context was, we're not having the impact. All of these things are gonna happen. And so our life, our experience is, we have to find meaning beyond whatever purposes that we create for ourselves, because all of these other things are God's, already are God's things.
Okay, good. Yes.
How I get it is, it's the sun, the wind, and the waters, if you will, are an analogy of vanity. Wind starts in the north, and it goes back to the south, returns again. So it's beginning again. The wind worked to get to one place, just to get right back where it was. Same with the waters. The rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not overflowing. So why is the water going? Then it can return back to where the rivers began. There's, yes, a cyclical pattern, but it always just starts over. That's why he says there's nothing new under the sun, because even the earth toils in vain. Thus you do as well.
Good. And again, very good, Dustin. I want to just remind again, the preacher is not going to be talking about things in light of eternity. From God's point of view, the creation is beautiful and majestic and incredibly wise. But from man's point of view, what happens under the sun, it's just as you described. Look at what he says about the sun. It's panting. It just keeps going and going and going and going. It's really beautiful, artistic, poetic contrasts. He starts with the sun and then describes the sun, and then he just starts describing something else that's gusting and blowing, and then says it's the wind. And then he starts with the sea. Sarah and I were at a national park a week ago, and we were driving down the road, and there was a gorgeous river off to one side, and I can't remember which of the two of us made the comment. Sometimes you just wonder, where does all the water go? Where is it? Does it ever run out? It just keeps going and going. The key is almost bookended at the beginning and at the end is, what is man gaining for all his efforts under the sun? Again, not with eternity in mind. And then, behold, there's nothing new. There's nothing, even if we can't see it in our lifetime, it's still repeating itself. So we're getting to some really deep truths here. Was there any questions I meant to ask earlier? Any questions? Yes.
When you read this, and you look at verse 3, as we pointed out, as one of the main points here, how it says, what does man gain? Do you think the preacher is saying in verse 8, all things are full of weariness, so it's playing off the idea of gaining, what do we gain? And then here is the fullness. I'm not sure.
Yes. Yes. As a result of the gain not being found under the sun, can you see, let me ask a question and then go right into your note, Dave. Can you see the negative adjectives that are used in the text as a result of the vanity and futility? I had to remind myself. Adjectives, noun, person, place, or thing, verb, action. Adjectives are descriptions. Anybody see them?
Verse 8 says wearisome. I would say dissatisfied. I don't know if unable, I do not think that's a verb, but.
Say that one more time. I couldn't hear you.
I think unable is a verb, but I can still kind of put it in.
Yeah, right.
Grouping.
Exactly. Apparently you've been teaching English lately or something. What would you use in your own words to describe these.
Waste, useless, and depressing for the
Okay. Wearisome. This is, man is unable to speak. For starters, man can't see the full picture. And he's going to get into that more in the end of chapter 1 and chapter 2. This is something that is so important for us to be able to listen to the preacher's message because of the wisdom that he is giving us, lest we go out on our own search to say, I can find it. There is something new. There is gain. I'm going to find it. No, we have this here. And from a purely physical, earthly standpoint, all these things are absolutely they wear you to death. Good. Any other thoughts or comments on that? Yes?
This isn't not exactly related to what we're talking about, but I think for the daily Bible reading, we had Ecclesiastes over the summer, and obviously my family was going through a really hard time over the summer, and I remember talking to Ryan Boyer, and he said something along the lines of, if you are happy in a good place in life, Ecclesiastes will make you super depressed. But if you're super depressed, Ecclesiastes is like really satisfying and helpful. And I think in this language in particular, that's like, the cycles of the world, they just keep on going. And so that can feel like meaningless. Oh, it's all futile. But if you're someone who feels like it's the end of the world and that like everything's crumbling around you, to read this and be like, the world is consistent. The world's going to keep spinning. The sun's going to come up tomorrow. That's actually like a really satisfying thing to hear. Like, yeah, it stinks right now. Yeah, things are kind of meaningless, but guess what? The world's going to keep turning. It's not the end of the world. It's a really helpful message to some people.
Good. Again, something I have done over and over with Ecclesiastes that has mistakenly, I think, led me to feel negatively about the message is either A, not seeing that the preacher is looking at things from an earthly standpoint, not in light of eternity, because he's going to look at things from eternity's light later in the text, and it's going to be right there and we're going to see it. Or B, I'm living for life underneath the sun, and thus I am feeling that. And in a way, to your thought and Ryan's thought, it is a very, very good test for us, and another reason why this study is so important. I mean, Sarah and I got to study this with a few friends, I guess 2 years ago, and afterwards we just told ourselves, we're going to have to read this at least once a year, or else we're going to get out of whack. It's that foundational and important for each and every one of us. So very, very good. Should be pretty easy. What age do people typically go seeking or searching for something new under the sun? Where does that often occur?
Speaking from my experience, I would say from age 13 to age 40. You're in a cycle of thinking you're going to conquer the world, and it's going to be new, and you're going to be the best one at it. During that period of time, that's a very applicable statement.
And then what happens after age 40?
You start realizing that life is not new, that everything's repeating itself, and you're not going to change the whole world after that.
What could that lead you to do then? Shouldn't, doesn't have to, but what could that reality that the preachers kind of arrived at possibly mistakenly lead us to?
I think it can make you cynical.
Yes.
Despair.
Yes. The preacher is going to warn against one and the other extreme over and over again. The beauty about the text is that he's going to show us how we can live joyfully all the days of our absolutely vain life. And if we miss that, just got to do it over till we get it right. I've missed it a lot. But absolutely, youth especially, midlife crisis. Yeah, precisely. What am I doing in life? Well, I just got to go out and do some more, because that's gonna do it for me. Instead of learning either from God's wisdom through the preacher or even from our own past experience that wasn't successful. Don't repeat my mistake. Yes, sir.
I don't have all my years yet to answer C, but we have been talking about the different cycles, and we see the sun is a cycle, the wind is a cycle, the streams are a cycle, but the first cycle mentioned is us.
Yes.
Is humanity,
Yes.
is man. And so I think at my stage in life, you think about like building a family and building up your home, and even the idea of building up generations, and like you're gonna have stability in that. But then even the generation that you're working so hard to build up is soon gonna be no more.
Absolutely. There was a, yes, sir.
I was gonna say, we have to be careful because we can find things new in God's creation.
I'm sorry, that last part?
It's okay to find things new, to be energetic about finding
Yes, sir.
new things in God's creation, but we have to realize we're talking about the condition of man here. It's really about, if you don't center it in God, then it's meaningless.
Okay, you bring us to another great, very important point. It would be important to explain, one second, it would be important to explain to your friend, why is man always so obsessed with finding something new under the sun? How would you go about doing that? Oh, yes, thank you.
Your question was going right next to my comment. I underlined there's nothing new under the sun. Of course, my mind went to look at the technology and electricity and everything that we have today. You know, during this time it was written, that would be new under the sun to them. Thinking about
Yes.
not spiritual things. And then I thought, then we have the abuse of the new things that we take for granted. Look at the things we have now. 100 years ago, people didn't have refrigerators in their home. People didn't have air conditioning. People didn't even have indoor plumbing in their home. And to answer your question, is because the eye is not satisfied by seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. There's always finding that next thing. I have to find that what's new. I have what's great now. We have the sun. We have the rivers. We have the wind. We have all these things that we need, but it's not enough. I need more. That's the warning I think that the preacher is saying right here.
Good. I would point out, in addition to D, the reason we do this is because we already wore out the last new thing that we thought was going to send us to the moon, and so we wore out to find the next thing that's going to wow us. That's such an important lesson for us. Don't make that mistake. And we can do it over and over and over again. A couple hands in the back. Maria, and then
I was gonna say, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if you keep it in perspective, and again, if you're centered, you know, your life purpose is centered in trying to glorify God. I mean, God gave us these incredible minds, and it says we were created in God's image, and we were created for a purpose. And I think what happens is that, you know, the devil comes along and he wants to pervert these great gifts that God has given us, and then, you know, it becomes necessary to have a message like what we have in Ecclesiastes to put us, to remind us, you know, don't let these great gifts that God has given us get out of whack. And you've got to know what your relationship is against the Lord, and your perspective has to be correct.
we do need to make the point. This is the introduction to the preacher's entire sermon, which is very interesting. He comes out with his sermon and gives the main point in the first sentence. And I was trying to imagine Ryan doing that. I was trying to think of a good example. But just imagine the main takeaway. He rolls out with it right off the bat. Vanity of vanities. Okay? Now we've got the text set up in this, some people call it a prologue, 11 verses. The meat is going to be in the middle. That's going to show us where all the vanity is, and you'll be as shocked, I'm sure, as I was. It's in many places you would have never expected it. There's even vanity that takes place in worship all the time. There's vanity in all ways. There's vanity in justice. Because there's an absence of justice, there is vanity all over, and we have to be this under the sun. It encompasses far more than I would have thought. Sarah and Luke?
I was just thinking that if our eyes are not fixed on heaven and the glory of God, and that, yes, our lives are vain here, but we're working towards something more, then our natural cycle as humans, like Mark was saying, is that we're going to realize everything is vain. And if we're not focused on God, then we're going to go searching for something to fill us up from the earth.
Excellent. That perfectly summarized why this book is so valuable to not only us, but to unbelievers. What are typically most of our unbeliever friends seeking or searching? Where are they typically searching their unfulfillment in? Exactly. This is so valuable. We're just about out of time. Important messages from the text. I think we talked about lessons, which was one last thing, but let's look at this. Repetitiveness in life. Again, we looked at this. Nature is an illustration for man's life and the repetitiveness. There's a cycle that happens, and it is repeated until we die, and there is no way that we can escape it. The next few verses that we're going to get to next week is specifically says God's basically given us this sense in us that we try to figure it out from beginning to end. He put this in us, and we can't. And from a physical standpoint, it is miserable because we can spend all our days, from an earthly standpoint, trying to find that. That's the bell. I really appreciate everyone's participation and look forward to next week. We'll be in chapter 1, verse 12 through the end of chapter 2, and we'll look at Vanity Illustrated.